My name is Beverly, and at 67 years old, I never imagined my only daughter, Amanda, would break my heart quite like this. When she got engaged to Garrett last spring, I was over the moon. I bought a new dress, had my hair done, and wrapped their gift with trembling hands. Then I called to confirm the time for their engagement dinner. Her response left me breathless. "Oh, we already had it yesterday. Just close family." Before I continue this story, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. I suppose to understand why those words cut so deeply, you need to know our history. I was happily married to Richard for 35 wonderful years before he passed away. We had a good life together. I spent most of my adult years as an elementary school teacher at Lincoln Elementary, molding young minds and coming home to a family I adored. Richard worked as an accountant at a local firm, never making a fortune, but always making sure we had what we needed. Amanda was our only child. We tried for years to have more children, but after 3 miscarriages, we accepted that Amanda would be our one and only. Perhaps that was part of the problem. I poured everything into being her mother, maybe too much in retrospect. Our weekends were filled with mother-daughter traditions. Saturday mornings we would make pancakes together with Amanda standing on a stool next to the stove as she got older, learning to flip them without making a mess. Sunday afternoons were for our special walks in Palmer Park, collecting interesting leaves in fall and wildflowers in spring. We would talk about everything during those walks, from schoolyard drama to her dreams for the future. The sacrifices came naturally. When Amanda showed promise in ballet, I worked extra tutoring sessions after school to pay for the best dance classes in town. When she needed braces, Richard and I postponed, replacing our 15-year-old car for another 2 years. When it came time for college applications, we remortgaged our modest home to ensure she could attend Westlake University without crippling student loans. Those teenage years had their challenges, as they do for any family. Amanda went through a rebellious phase at 16, staying out past curfew and experimenting with clothing choices that gave me minor heart attacks. But even then, our core relationship remained intact. She would still crawl into my bed on Sunday mornings for our weekly catch-up talks, confiding her secret crushes and deepest insecurities. Everything changed when Richard got sick. The cancer diagnosis came just before Amanda started her sophomore year of college. For 3 years, our lives revolved around treatments, hospital visits, and brief periods of hope crushed by devastating setbacks. Amanda came home frequently during that time, and I saw her mature in ways that broke my heart. She would sit by her father's bedside reading his favorite poetry aloud when he became too weak to hold a book. Richard passed away 5 years ago. Amanda was 22 and just starting graduate school. I was suddenly alone in our family home for the first time in decades. The silence was deafening. Amanda called daily those first few months, worried about how I was coping. But gradually, as life moved forward, those calls became less frequent. I noticed the change in Amanda during her college years. The friends she brought home during breaks were different from her high school crowd. They wore designer clothes and talked about exclusive parties and connections. Amanda began carefully curating her wardrobe, saving up from her campus job to buy brands I had never heard of. She became more conscious of appearances of fitting in with a certain crowd. When she met Garrett during her first year of graduate school, I was initially thrilled. He was studying business administration and came from a good family. Amanda was clearly smitten, glowing whenever she talked about him. It was only when I met his parents, Thomas and Laura Wilson, at a dinner 6 months into their relationship, that I began to sense the problem. The Wilsons owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across 3 states. They lived in a gated community in a house with more bathrooms than I had rooms. Laura wore diamond earrings to a casual dinner that probably cost more than my yearly teacher's salary. Throughout the evening, they made subtle comments about Amanda's potential, as though she were a project they were considering investing in. I noticed Amanda carefully watching Laura throughout that dinner, mirroring her mannerisms, laughing at her jokes a beat too enthusiastically. When Laura mentioned their summer home in Martha's Vineyard, Amanda acted as though she had spent her childhood summers there, too, rather than at the community pool where she had actually learned to swim. Still, I made every effort to connect with Garrett's family. I brought homemade apple pie to their gatherings, complimented their home sincerely, and asked thoughtful questions about their business. Thomas would answer politely but briefly before turning to more interesting conversation partners. Laura would accept my pie with a tight smile, place it in the kitchen, and serve store-bought desserts instead. Gradually, I saw less and less of Amanda. She began spending holidays with the Wilsons, citing their family traditions and the difficulty of splitting time between families. She would visit me the weekend before or after, bringing leftover pie and telling stories of the elaborate celebrations I had missed. I was being systematically sidelined, but I told myself this was normal. Adult children build their own lives. I should be grateful she found someone who made her happy, who could provide a life of security and comfort. If I felt a pang watching her transform into someone I barely recognized, I kept it to myself. I found out about Amanda and Garrett's engagement through Facebook. My morning routine had become fixed after retirement coffee on the porch swing. Richard had built reading the news on my tablet and checking social media to keep up with former students and distant relatives. That particular Tuesday, I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw the professionally photographed announcement. Amanda, radiant in a blue dress, I had never seen standing beside Garrett on a beach at sunset, a massive diamond catching the last golden rays of light. The caption read, "She said, 'Yes, excited to begin forever with my best friend.'" 127 comments of congratulations appeared below. I stared at my tablet joy and hurt warring in my chest. My daughter was engaged, and I had learned about it alongside hundreds of casual acquaintances. I waited for her call that morning, expecting she had posted the announcement late the previous night and would certainly reach out to her mother first thing. By noon, my phone remained silent. I considered calling her but hesitated. Perhaps there was a reason, a special way she wanted to tell me in person. Finally, at 3 p.m, my phone rang. Amanda sounded breathless with excitement, launching into details about the proposal on the private beach at the Wilsons' vacation property, how Garrett had arranged for a photographer to hide nearby, how Laura had helped plan everything, down to the exact moment the sun would create the perfect lighting for their photos. "Mom, are you still there?" she asked when I remained quiet too long. "Yes, sweetie. Congratulations. I saw the announcement online." A beat of silence. "Oh, I meant to call you last night, but everything was so crazy with the celebration dinner the Wilsons arranged, and then we were up late calling Garrett's relatives overseas." I swallowed my hurt. "It's fine. I understand. The ring is beautiful. Isn't it Laura helped him pick it out? 3 carats emerald cut with baguettes on the side." I listened as she described the exclusive jeweler they had visited, the champagne they had sipped while browsing options, the family heirloom diamonds Laura had offered to incorporate if Amanda preferred a different style. When I asked about wedding plans, Amanda became vague. "We're thinking next June, but nothing is set yet. Laura knows an amazing wedding planner who works with all the best venues. She said not to worry about anything, she'll help me through every step." I offered my assistance, mentioning I had plenty of free time now that I was retired. That's sweet, Mom, but this planner is seriously connected. We're talking venues with 2-year waiting lists that she can get us into next year, but I'll definitely need your input on some things. That input was never requested. Over the following weeks, I watched their wedding planning unfold through social media posts, venue tours at historic mansions and oceanfront estates, cake tastings at French patisseries, floral design consultations with arrangements that cost more than my monthly pension. When I called Amanda to ask about these events, her answers were always the same. Everything happened last minute. Laura had connections that called with cancellations. They didn't want to bother me with the drive into the city. They thought I would find it boring. I confided my concerns to my best friend Judith over lunch one day. "They're excluding you deliberately," Bev Judith said. "Always one to speak bluntly after 40 years of friendship. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" What can I do? She's an adult. I can't force my way into her wedding planning. Have you told her how you feel? I stirred my soup, avoiding Judith's sighs. I don't want to be that mother, the one who makes everything about herself. There's a difference between making everything about yourself and standing up for basic respect, Judith replied, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I promised to think about it, but in truth I was afraid. Afraid of pushing Amanda further away. Afraid of confirming my growing suspicion that I had become an embarrassment to my daughter, a reminder of her middle-class origins that didn't fit with the life she was creating with the Wilsons. I tried to give Amanda space while staying connected. I sent thoughtful texts about wedding details I spotted online. The orchid centerpieces were stunning. "Is that what you're considering for the reception?" I would ask. Her replies were increasingly delayed and brief. "Nothing final yet. Laura has more ideas to show me." One evening while browsing Instagram, I discovered a post from one of Garrett's cousins that made my stomach drop. It showed a large group at what was clearly an engagement celebration at an upscale restaurant. The caption read, "Celebrating the future. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson family tradition continues with the 4th-generation engagement dinner at Le Bernardin." I scrutinized the photo, recognizing Garrett's parents, grandparents, siblings, and various extended family members. Amanda sat in the center beside Garrett, wearing a champagne-colored dress, laughing at something Laura was saying beside her. I counted 17 people in the image, none of them me. When I called Amanda the next day, she mentioned nothing about this dinner. She chatted about work stress and asked about my garden before saying she needed to run to a meeting. I wanted to ask about the dinner, but couldn't find the courage. If she wanted me there, I would have been invited. Bringing it up would only create tension. As weeks passed, I saw more evidence of celebrations I hadn't been included in. A bridal luncheon at the country club. A weekend wedding planning retreat at the Wilsons' vacation home. Each time Amanda had an excuse ready if I mentioned it. The luncheon was just Laura's friends meeting me. The weekend retreat came together at the last minute when some accommodation opened up. I began to notice how often Amanda deferred to Laura's opinions. When I suggested a baker who had made beautiful wedding cakes for several teachers at my school, Amanda dismissed the idea. Laura says fondant from non-French-trained pastry chefs always tastes like Play-Doh. When I offered my mother's recipe for the punch we had served at family celebrations for generations, Amanda wrinkled her nose. Laura says open punch bowls are unsanitary and outdated. Laura said. Laura thinks. Laura knows. Laura. I began to dread checking social media, yet couldn't stop myself from looking each new post a fresh paper cut to my already wounded heart. But nothing prepared me for the pain of the engagement dinner discovery. May 15th was circled on my calendar in red pen. For weeks I had anticipated the official engagement dinner. While Amanda hadn't formally invited me, or provided details she had mentioned during a brief phone call in April, that they were thinking about having an engagement dinner with both families in mid-May. I had immediately marked the most likely weekend on my calendar and begun preparations. I spent $300 I couldn't really spare on a new dress, a soft blue number that the boutique owner assured me was both elegant and age-appropriate. I had my hair colored to cover the increasing gray and splurged on a professional styling the morning of the 15th. I found the perfect gift, a pair of handcrafted silver picture frames. One held a photo of Amanda as a little girl in Richard's arms. The other left empty for a wedding photo. I wrote a heartfelt card about the continuity of family and love across generations. At 1 o'clock, dressed and ready gift wrapped, and waiting on the coffee table, I realized I still didn't know what time the dinner would start or where it would be held. I had been checking my phone obsessively for days, waiting for details, afraid to ask directly for fear of appearing needy or confirming my suspicion that I had been forgotten. Finally, I called Amanda. My palms were sweating as the phone rang 3, 4, 5 times before she answered. "Hey, Mom," she said, the sounds of conversation and laughter in the background. "Can I call you back? We're just finishing up brunch." "Of course," I said quickly. "I just wanted to check what time the engagement dinner is tonight, and the address I'm all ready, but realized I don't have the details." The background noise suddenly dampened as though she had moved to a quieter location. There was a pause that lasted a beat too long. "Oh," Amanda said, her voice careful, "we had it yesterday. Just close family." My vision actually blurred. I sat down hard on the edge of the sofa, the air leaving my lungs as though I had been punched. Yesterday I managed to say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Yeah, it was a last-minute thing at the Wilsons' Club. Thomas had some colleagues in town who wanted to meet me, and it just turned into an engagement celebration. Very impromptu. I clutched the phone tighter, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I see. Well, I'm sorry I missed it." It wasn't a big deal, honestly. Just dinner with Thomas's business associates and some family. Right. Just close family. The words tasted bitter on my tongue. After we hung up, I sat in my silent living room for nearly an hour, still dressed in my new outfit, the wrapped gift mocking me from the coffee table. I didn't cry immediately. The hurt was too profound, too stunning for tears. Later that evening, after changing into my nightgown at only 6:30 in the afternoon, I made the mistake of checking Instagram. There they were. Dozens of photos from an elaborate engagement dinner that had clearly been planned for weeks, not the impromptu gathering Amanda had described. The venue was the grand ballroom of the Wilsons Country Club, decorated with thousands of white roses and twinkling lights. A custom ice sculpture of Amanda and Garrett's initials stood at the center of a lavish seafood display. A string quartet could be seen in the background of several shots. Printed menus detailed a 5-course meal with wine pairings. And the guests. So many guests. Garrett's parents, grandparents, his sister Natalie, and her husband, at least 3 aunts and uncles, numerous cousins. Business associates of Thomas, certainly, but also what appeared to be every member of the Wilson family tree down to elderly great-aunts and toddling second cousins. In one particularly painful photo, Amanda stood between Laura and an older woman I recognized as Garrett's grandmother, all 3 with champagne flutes raised. The caption read, "3 generations of Wilson women welcoming the newest member to the family." I was not just excluded, I was erased. In Amanda's new narrative, she had no family before the Wilsons. I was an inconvenient detail from a past she was leaving behind. Only then, looking at my daughter's radiant smile in photos of a celebration I knew nothing about, did the tears finally come. I cried until my throat was raw, until my new pillowcases were soaked, until exhaustion finally granted me the mercy of sleep. The next morning, a text from Amanda arrived. "Sorry again about the confusion with dinner. It really was last minute, and honestly not that special. We'll plan something with you soon, promise." I read it and set my phone down without replying. The photos I had seen told a different story, one of meticulous planning and intentional exclusion. No response I could craft would bridge the chasm that had opened between the truth and the lie my daughter expected me to accept. The week following the engagement dinner revelation was among the darkest of my life, rivaling even the bleak days after Richard's death. At least then, I had Amanda by my side grieving with me our shared loss, creating an unbreakable bond. Now I grieved alone, mourning not just my exclusion from a single event, but the systematic dismantling of my place in my daughter's life. I cycled through emotions with exhausting rapidity. Hurt gave way to rage, rage to crushing sadness, sadness to desperate self-examination. Had I failed as a mother? Was this karmic retribution for some parental shortcoming? I was blind to. I revisited Amanda's childhood, obsessively searching for the moment where I had planted the seeds of this betrayal. Judith called daily concerned after I canceled our weekly lunch and stopped responding to texts. When she finally showed up on my doorstep with groceries and a determined expression, I broke down before she even reached the kitchen with the bags. "She's ashamed of me," I sobbed, as Judith held me at the kitchen table. "My own daughter is erasing me from her life because I'm not fancy enough for her new family." "That's her shame to bear, not yours," Judith said firmly. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. You raised that girl with more love and support than most children ever get." My sister Eleanor called from Arizona after Judith alerted her to my state. Eleanor had always been the pragmatic, one less sentimental than me, more willing to call situations exactly as she saw them. "Amanda is showing you who she is right now," Eleanor said bluntly. "The question is whether you're willing to see it." "She's still my daughter," I protested weakly. "Yes, and you'll always love her. But loving someone doesn't mean being their doormat. It doesn't mean financing their wedding when they treat you like an embarrassing secret." Eleanor's words hit a nerve. Amanda hadn't directly asked for money for the wedding yet, but there had been hints, comments about the rising costs of venues. Mentions of the custom gown Laura had found that was a bit over budget. I had assumed, as had Amanda, I'm sure, that I would contribute significantly to my only daughter's wedding, despite my modest retirement income. My friends offered conflicting advice. Judith thought I should confront Amanda, directly lay my hurt feelings bare, and demand an explanation. My neighbor Patricia suggested killing Amanda with kindness, continuing to support her while making it clear I was the bigger person. My walking partner Susan advised cutting Amanda off financially until she apologized sincerely. I couldn't sleep. I lost 6 pounds in 10 days. My blood pressure, normally well controlled with medication, spiked alarmingly. My doctor, concerned after a routine checkup, showed my physical decline, gently suggested I might benefit from talking to someone professional. That's how I found myself in Dr. Carolyn Winter's office, a modest space with comfortable chairs and a view of the park. At 62, Dr. Carolyn Winter's office. Winters was close to my age, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses and a direct manner that reminded me of Eleanor. "Tell me why you're here, Beverly," she said after we settled in. I recounted the engagement dinner incident, then found myself spilling the entire history of Amanda's transformation and my growing exclusion from her life. "Doctor." Winters listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making notes. "What do you want from your relationship with Amanda?" she asked, when I finally fell silent. The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on what I had lost on Amanda's behavior that I hadn't considered what I actually wanted going forward. "I want my daughter back," I said automatically, then paused. "No, that's not quite right. I want a relationship with my adult daughter based on mutual respect and honesty. I want to be included in her life, in a meaningful way, not as an afterthought." "Those are reasonable wants," Dr. Winters observed. "Now, what are you willing to do to create that relationship?" "Anything," I said quickly. She smiled gently. "That's the problem, isn't it? You've been willing to do anything, accept any treatment, overlook any slight, all to maintain a connection with Amanda. How has that strategy worked so far?" I felt a flush of defensiveness followed quickly by the deflating recognition of truth. Not well, I admitted. Over the next 3 sessions, Dr. Winters helped me understand how my fear of losing Amanda had led me to enable her increasingly disrespectful behavior. We explored my difficulty setting boundaries, tracing it back to my own mother's emotional volatility and my childhood pattern of peacekeeping at any cost. "Your mother made her love conditional," Dr. Winters noted during our 4th session. "You responded by making your love for Amanda unconditional, which is beautiful. But you also made your self-respect conditional, and that's where the problem lies." For the first time, I began to see the distinction between loving my daughter unconditionally and allowing her to treat me as though I were dispensable. I realized I had been teaching Amanda that my feelings didn't matter, that her convenience outweighed my dignity. I've been so afraid of being the controlling mother that I became the invisible one. Instead, I told Dr. Winters as this insight crystallized. We discussed the connection between my financial support and the emotional dynamics with Amanda. I had always seen my willingness to help financially as an expression of love, but Dr. Winters suggested it had become something else. "Money is rarely just money in family relationships," she explained. "It often becomes a proxy for love control, guilt, or obligation. Amanda may have learned that she doesn't need to respect your feelings or include you meaningfully in her life as long as she maintains enough contact to ensure your financial support." The realization was painful but clarifying. I had been using money as a way to stay relevant in Amanda's life, and she had been using the promise of inclusion to ensure my continued financial support. It was a transaction disguised as a relationship, and it was making both of us unhealthy. "What do I do now?" I asked. "You begin the hard work of establishing boundaries while still leaving the door open for a more authentic relationship," Dr. Winters replied. "And you start building a life that brings you joy, whether or not Amanda chooses to be a major part of it." My moment of clarity came during my 6th session with Dr. Winters. We were discussing my fears about setting financial boundaries with Amanda when Dr. Winters asked a simple question. "What would Richard advise you to do in this situation?" The answer came immediately with such certainty that I could almost hear Richard's voice. He would tell me to stand up for myself, but to do it with love rather than bitterness. Richard had always been my backbone in difficult situations. Where I would waffle and worry about hurting feelings, he would calmly state his boundaries, with kindness but firmness. His ability to say no without apology or anger was something I had always admired, but never quite mastered. "I think it's time I channeled a little more Richard, and a little less of my people-pleasing self," I told Dr. Winters, who smiled approvingly. That evening, I called my sister Eleanor for a long overdue heart-to-heart. After bringing her up to date on my therapy insights, I asked for her support in the boundary-setting process ahead. "It's about damn time," Eleanor said, her voice warm, despite the blunt words. "I've been waiting 30 years for you to stand up for yourself." "Of course I'll support you. What's the plan?" I laid out the approach Dr. Winters and I had discussed. First, I would clarify for myself exactly what I was and wasn't willing to contribute financially to the wedding. Then, I would communicate those boundaries clearly to Amanda, without anger or ultimatums, but also without room for manipulation or guilt trips. The tricky part, I admitted to Eleanor, is that I need to do this without expecting it to change Amanda's behavior. This has to be about what I need for my own self-respect, not about trying to force her to include me. That's the hardest part of boundaries, Eleanor agreed, detaching from the outcome. "But I'm proud of you, Bev. Richard would be proud too." With my resolve strengthened, I began the process of building a more independent life, one where my happiness wasn't solely dependent on my relationship with Amanda. I joined a book club at the library that met weekly. I signed up for the watercolor painting class I had been eyeing for years, but always put off because Amanda occasionally dropped by on Thursday evenings. I reconnected with former colleagues for monthly lunch dates. I volunteered 2 mornings a week at an elementary school literacy program, reading with children who reminded me why I had loved teaching so much. I even accepted my neighbor Jack's invitation to attend a community theater production, my first social outing with a man since Richard's death. "You're blossoming," Judith observed over coffee after my 3rd painting class. "There's a light in your eyes I haven't seen in years." I felt it too, a growing sense of possibility and purpose that had nothing to do with my identity as Amanda's mother. The constant ache of her rejection began to subside, not because the hurt was any less real, but because it no longer defined the entirety of my existence. In preparation for the inevitable financial discussion with Amanda, I met with my financial advisor, Martin, who had helped manage my modest investments since Richard's passing. I was transparent about my situation, explaining that I wanted to support my daughter's wedding appropriately without compromising my financial security or my self-respect. Martin reviewed my accounts thoughtfully. "Based on your retirement income and savings, I would suggest a maximum contribution of $7,000, he advised. "That's generous, without putting your future at risk." The figure was far less than the $20,000 to $30,000 I knew Amanda was likely expecting, based on her comments about wedding costs and the lavish plans I had seen unfolding online. But it was an honest reflection of both my financial reality and the current state of our relationship. "You're not Bank of Mom," Martin reminded me gently. "You're a retired teacher on a fixed income. There's no shame in having financial boundaries." Armed with this clarity, I drafted guidelines for myself about my involvement in the wedding going forward. I would attend if genuinely invited, but wouldn't push for inclusion in planning activities. I would offer the financial contribution Martin and I had agreed upon, with no expectation of controlling how it was used. I would be civil and cordial to the Wilsons regardless of their treatment of me. Most importantly, I decided I would only participate in ways that preserved my dignity. No more waiting by the phone for invitations that never came. No more pretending exclusion didn't hurt. No more financing events I wasn't welcome to attend. The physical transformation that accompanied my emotional one surprised even me. As I began prioritizing self-care, the stress-induced weight loss reversed. My complexion improved once I started sleeping through the night again. I treated myself to a new hairstyle, shorter and more modern than the conservative cut I had maintained for decades. "Well, look at you," Jack said appreciatively when he picked me up for our 2nd theater outing. "Retirement clearly agrees with you." For the first time in months, I felt prepared for whatever came next with Amanda. I had done the internal work necessary to face the coming confrontation with clarity rather than desperation. I knew my worth wasn't dependent on her validation or the Wilsons' approval. When the financial reckoning finally came, it arrived with a panicked phone call on a Tuesday morning in June, almost exactly a week after the engagement dinner revelation. I was in my garden pruning the hydrangeas Richard had planted for our 20th anniversary when my phone rang. Amanda's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, still raw from the engagement dinner deception. But part of my new approach was honesty rather than avoidance, so I removed my gardening gloves and answered. Mom Amanda's voice had the breathless quality it acquired whenever she was stressed. "Thank God you picked up. I need your help." I sat on the garden bench, steeling myself. "What's going on, Amanda?" "It's the venue deposit. We put down a $5,000 hold when we first toured Bellamy Estate, but the full deposit of $15,000 is due by 5 o'clock today, or we lose the date and the initial payment." I remained silent, letting her continue. "We put it on Garrett's card yesterday, but it didn't go through. Something about a security hold because it's such a large charge. We've been on the phone with the bank all morning, but they're saying it won't be resolved for 24 to 48 hours. Another pause. I could hear her rapid breathing through the phone. "Mom, did you hear me? We need to pay $15,000 today, or we lose our wedding venue and $5,000. "I heard you," I said calmly. "So can you transfer the money to my account? I'll pay you back as soon as Garrett's card issue is fixed." The old Beverly would have been logging into her bank account, already desperate to solve Amanda's problem, grateful for the chance to be needed. The new Beverly took a deep breath and responded with the quiet confidence I had been practicing. "Didn't I warn you?" What Amanda sounded genuinely confused. "When you were 16 and wanted to go to Sarah's unsupervised party, when you were 20 and wanted to put that semester abroad on credit cards, when you were 24 and nearly signed a lease you couldn't afford. Each time I warned you about rushing into financial commitments without a solid plan." "Mom, this isn't the time for life lessons. This is my wedding venue we're talking about." "Yes, it Island, and it's a significant amount of money. I'm curious why you'd commit to such a large payment without confirming the funds were available." Amanda's voice took on the cajoling tone she had perfected as a teenager. "Mom, please. I'm really stressed right now. Garrett's parents are in meetings all day, and the venue coordinator is calling every hour for an update. I need you to help me fix this." "I understand you're stressed," I said, maintaining my calm. "And I do want to help, but not in the way you're asking." "What is that supposed to mean?" The cajoling tone vanished, replaced by irritation. "It means I've given a lot of thought to how I can best support your wedding. I've decided I can contribute $7,000 toward your wedding expenses. You're welcome to use that for part of this venue deposit if you'd like." Silence. Then $7,000. "Mom, the photographer alone costs $12,000. I understand this wedding is going to be very expensive. My contribution reflects what I can comfortably afford on my retirement income. But I thought, we all assumed you'd be covering a lot more than that." Amanda's voice had shifted again this time to disbelief. "You're my mother. This is my wedding. Yes, I am your mother. The same mother who wasn't important enough to invite to your engagement dinner." There it was. The elephant in the room finally acknowledged. "Oh my God, that's what this is about. You're punishing me over a dinner." "I'm not punishing you, Amanda. I'm establishing a boundary that reflects the current reality of our relationship." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means that relationships, including ours, involve mutual respect and consideration. When you decided I wasn't important enough to include in your engagement celebration, you sent a clear message about my place in your life. I've accepted that message, and I'm adjusting my financial support accordingly." "That dinner wasn't a big deal," Amanda protested. "It was just a small thing the Wilsons put together." "Amanda," I said gently, "I saw the photos. Dozens of them. It was an elaborate event with at least 30 guests, including distant relatives and business associates. You had custom menus printed. There was an ice sculpture." A long pause. "Laura planned all that. I didn't have any control over the guest list." "You had control over whether to tell me the truth. You chose to lie and say it was last minute when the photos showed weeks of planning. You chose to exclude me and then hide that choice behind falsehoods. I didn't want to hurt your feelings," she said, her voice smaller now. "Yet here we are with my feelings deeply hurt anyway. Not just by the exclusion, but by the deception afterward." I could hear muffled conversation on Amanda's end. Then she came back, sounding more composed. "Look, I'm sorry about the dinner. Really. It was wrong of me not to insist you be included. But can we please deal with that later? Right now, I have a financial emergency that needs solving immediately. I've told you what I can offer. $7,000. That's a genuine, heartfelt contribution that represents what I can afford and what feels appropriate given our current relationship." "That's not enough." The panic was back in her voice. "The venue needs $15,000 today. Then you'll need to find the remaining $8,000 elsewhere. Perhaps the Wilsons can help since they've been so involved in the planning. They're in meetings all day. I told you that. Perhaps Garrett could try a different credit card, or you could call the venue and negotiate a payment extension." "Why are you being like this?" Amanda's voice cracked. "All these years you've always been there for me, and the one time I really need you, you're letting me down over some stupid dinner I didn't even plan." The accusation stung, but I recognized the manipulation tactic for what it was. "I'm sorry you see it that way. My offer stands. $7,000. You can let me know if and how you'd like to use it." "Fine," Amanda snapped. "I'll figure it out myself, like I always do." The call ended abruptly. I sat in my garden for a long time afterward, watching bees move among the lavender plants. Despite the confrontation, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had stated my boundaries clearly and held them despite emotional pressure. That night I slept more soundly than I had in weeks. When I woke, there were no texts or missed calls from Amanda. I went about my day attending my watercolor class, where I was finally making progress on a landscape that had been giving me trouble. My instructor commented on the improved confidence in my brushstrokes. In the evening, Judith called to check on me. I recounted the conversation with Amanda. "I'm proud of you," Judith said warmly. "That couldn't have been easy." "Strangely, it was easier than I expected," I replied. "Once I was clear about my boundaries, the rest just flowed naturally." "Have you heard from her since?" "Not yet. I imagine she's still angry." "She'll come around," Judith predicted. "Once she realizes manipulation won't work anymore, she'll have to decide if she wants a real relationship with you." "I hope so," I said. "But even if she doesn't, I know I did the right thing. For both of us, really." For the first time since the engagement dinner revelation, I didn't check social media before bed. Whatever Amanda was posting or not posting, whatever narrative she was creating about our confrontation, it didn't define me. I was reclaiming my story one boundary at a time. 10 days passed without a word from Amanda. No calls, no texts, no social media messages. In the past, this silence would have devastated me, sent me into a spiral of anxiety and desperate attempts to reestablish contact. Now, though it still hurt, I recognized it as part of the process of our relationship finding a new equilibrium. I maintained my routine, finding joy in small daily pleasures. My garden flourished under my attentive care. My watercolor skills improved with each class. I made new friends in my book club, including Marilyn, a retired nurse with a wicked sense of humor who invited me to join her weekly walking group. On the 11th day, a text from Amanda appeared. "Can we talk?" I responded simply, "Yes, I'm here when you're ready." 3 more days passed before she called. When we finally spoke, her voice sounded different, more subdued, less entitled. "The venue worked with us," she said after an awkward greeting. "They agreed to extend the payment deadline until Garrett's card issue was resolved." "I'm glad that worked out," I replied neutrally. "Yeah, well, we also scaled back some things, changed the floral package, adjusted the menu." She paused. Laura wasn't happy about it. I remained silent, waiting. "Anyway, I've been thinking about what you said. About the engagement dinner. You were right. I should have insisted you be included. And I definitely shouldn't have lied about it being last minute. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start. Thank you for acknowledging that," I said. "It hurt very deeply to be excluded and then lied to." "I know." Another pause. "Do you think we could meet for coffee or something? This feels too big for a phone call." We arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between our homes. When I arrived, Amanda was already there, looking more like the daughter I remembered than the polished stranger she had become. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. "I ordered your favorite," she said, gesturing to a latte waiting at my place. "Cinnamon dolce with almond milk right." The small gesture of remembering my preference touched me unexpectedly. "Thank you." We engaged in careful small talk for a few minutes before Amanda took a deep breath and met my eyes directly. "I'm sorry, Mom. Really sorry. Not just about the dinner, but about how I've been treating you for a long time now." The words I had been waiting to hear. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "When I met Garrett, I felt like I was entering this whole different world. Everything was so perfect and polished, and I was terrified of not measuring up. The Wilsons have all these unspoken rules and expectations, and I've been killing myself trying to meet them." "That sounds exhausting," I offered. "It island." She twisted her engagement ring nervously. "Laura has an opinion about everything, and they're all presented as absolute facts. The right schools, the right neighborhoods, the right china pattern." I started to feel like everything from my life before Garrett was somehow wrong or embarrassing. "Including me," I said softly. Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "Including you. And that's so messed up, Mom, because you are the best part of my life before Garrett. You've always supported me, always believed in me. You and Dad gave me so much love." She wiped her eyes with a napkin. "When Laura suggested keeping the engagement dinner just family, I knew it was wrong to exclude you. But I was so desperate for her approval, for feeling like I belonged with them. And then one compromise led to another. And suddenly, I was living this double life, trying to be the perfect Wilson daughter-in-law, while pushing away the person who's always loved me unconditionally." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Thank you for being honest with me. When you refused to just send the money for the venue, it shocked me. You've always been there to bail me out, no questions asked. At first I was furious, but then I started thinking about everything you said, about mutual respect and boundaries." She squeezed my hand. "You were right, Mom. Our relationship had become transactional. I was taking you for granted, assuming your financial support while excluding you from my life in important ways. What do you want going forward?" I asked, echoing the question Dr. Winters had posed to me. Amanda considered this carefully. I want my mom back in my life. Really in my life, not just on the periphery. I want to find a balance between my relationship with you and my new family with Garrett. And I want to stop trying so hard to be someone I'm not. That sounds like a good start, I said. I want those things too. And I want us to be honest with each other even when it's uncomfortable. We talked for over 2 hours, delving into the patterns that had damaged our relationship and establishing new expectations moving forward. Amanda shared her struggles with feeling inadequate around the Wilsons, and I acknowledged my tendency to enable rather than set healthy boundaries. "What about the wedding?" Amanda asked eventually. "Is your offer of $7,000 still open?" "Yes," I confirmed. "That's what I can comfortably contribute, but my financial support and my emotional support are separate issues. I will be there for you regardless." Amanda nodded. "I understand. And honestly, this whole venue crisis made me realize how out of control the wedding planning has become. Garrett and I talked, and we're scaling back in some areas, making it more about what we want and less about impressing Laura's social circle." In the weeks that followed, our relationship began to heal one honest conversation at a time. Amanda invited me to a cake, tasting just the two of us, reminiscent of our Saturday baking sessions when she was little. She began standing up to Laura more politely, but firmly asserting her own preferences for the wedding. "I told her I wanted you to help me choose my dress," Amanda confided during one of our now regular Sunday phone calls. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon, but she backed down. The dress shopping expedition became a precious memory. Just Amanda, me, and her best friend Sophia in a small boutique that specialized in sample designer gowns at accessible prices. When Amanda emerged in a simple, elegant sheath that highlighted her natural beauty rather than overwhelmed it, we both knew it was the one, despite it being far from the elaborate ball gown Laura had envisioned. "You look like yourself," I told her, as she twirled in front of the mirror. "Your most beautiful self." The wedding planning continued with its inevitable stresses, but Amanda made consistent efforts to include me meaningfully. She asked me to help address invitations, knowing my years of teaching had given me neat penmanship. She requested Richard's favorite chocolate cake recipe for the groom's cake, a small but significant nod to her father's memory. The Wilsons remained the Wilsons. Laura made occasional passive-aggressive comments about my modest contributions, which Amanda now deflected with newfound grace. Thomas continued to treat me with distracted politeness at joint planning events, but their behavior no longer defined my worth or determined my happiness. On the wedding day itself, as I helped Amanda with the pearl earrings that had been my mother's, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered, "even when I was awful." "I'll never give up on you," I promised. "But I won't lose myself for you either. That's the balance I needed to find." "It's the balance I needed too," she replied, wisdom in her young eyes. I almost lost the most important relationship in my life because I was so focused on impressing people whose approval ultimately doesn't matter. The ceremony was beautiful, the reception elegant but not ostentatious. I sat at the family table beside Garrett's grandparents, treated with the respect my position as mother of the bride warranted. When Amanda and Garrett visited each table during dinner, they lingered at mine. Garrett genuinely thanking me for raising the amazing woman he was lucky enough to marry. Laura, perhaps sensing the shift in dynamics, made a point of including me in the formal family photos and acknowledged my contribution to the floral arrangements in her speech. It wasn't friendship, but it was civil, and that was enough. As I watched Amanda and Garrett share their first dance, I reflected on the journey of the past few months. The pain of exclusion had ultimately led to growth, both for me individually and for my relationship with my daughter. By finding the courage to establish boundaries, I had created space for a more authentic connection. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges. Old patterns don't disappear overnight. But I had discovered a strength in myself I hadn't known. Existed an ability to stand firm in my worthwhile, still offering love without conditions. If you're watching this and struggling with a difficult family relationship, remember that true love includes both compassion and boundaries. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to stop enabling behaviors that harm both of you. The path to healing begins with honesty, both with yourself and with others. So I ask you, have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with someone you love? How did you balance maintaining your self-respect with preserving the relationship? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your dignity and transform a relationship built on obligation into one founded on mutual respect. Thank you for listening to my story.